My name is Lawrence Levictois. I'm with the HR department. Assisting me today is Sarah Jenkins. She's also with HR, and Elva Rios Chavez. She's also with HR. As you know, in the email I sent, there were 4 finalists. You may know some of these. Brenda Abney, she's the museum manager. Keith Burke, who's Deputy Community Services Director. Kathy Husser, Deputy Community Services Director. And Mike Svetz, who's with a principal at Pros Consulting, but prior to that, you were a director at 2 different cities in Parks and Recreation, 3 different cities.
But I'll explain that a bit.
Yeah. Just to go over a little bit about the process on an employee forum, for those of you that haven't been involved in one in the past, the candidates will get a couple of minutes to do an introduction. Each one will do a brief background about themselves, and then we'll open it to the audience for audience questions. If you want to ask a question out loud, just raise your hand. I'll come with you to a mic because, as you know, they're filming this for your coworkers who were unable to attend. And then the candidates will answer it, and what they'll do is each candidate will answer the same question. And then if in between, I'll intersperse that with some of the written questions that people submitted when they came in. Then afterwards, we'll conclude with each candidate having about a minute to go over basically a closing statement. And then, does everybody have a feedback form? Okay, great. Strongly encourage you to complete that and turn it in at the end of the process, otherwise it won't be considered. So for us to consider it, we need to have the feedback forms submitted before you leave. And with that, we'll go ahead and begin. And I believe Brenda is going to be the first.
Good afternoon. I think I know most of you, and as you heard, I began here at the City of Tempe as a museum manager, and now I'm in an expanded role as a manager of visual arts and culture. What you may not know about me is that I have worked in other cities in levels of employment with increasing responsibility through those roles. I started out in Ketchikan, Alaska, creating exhibits for multicultural communities, and then went to managing a programs division there where we offered classes, workshops, and programs, and then was in a senior management level position in which I thought strategically about our department while managing the museum collections, the research library, and city art program. I went on to the City of Kent, Washington, where I was in charge of the public art program, galleries, arts education, and as a team, coordinated large events and festivals for the city. In that role, I managed a large $2 per capita arts fund and created 5-year plans in which I presented to the City Council for approval. I then went on to the City of Wenatchee, Washington, where I served for 8 years as the City Department Director, overseeing the Museum and Cultural Center, Historic Preservation, and Arts Commission. I led 17 different nonprofit and city affiliate programs that ranged from a genealogical library to an annual Hispanic festival that served North Central Washington to managing a railroad in a public utilities district park. In all of those roles, I was a leader at some level. I managed staff, budgets, operations, and facilities. I was able to think strategically about the organization and about our delivery of services to the community. And I also gained a vast array of experience that in community services, park and recreation that would serve me well as department director here for the City of Tempe.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Oh, sorry. Keith Burke, Community Services Deputy Director of Recreation. I know a lot of you in this room, so it's good to see you. For those that you don't, just go a little bit about my history and my background. I'm originally from California, came out here to go to school at ASU, and graduated with a Bachelor's of Science degree in sociology, where I actually started my career working with the City of Tempe at the Escalante Community Center, working in a vast array of programming with just recreation and education activities, summer camps, after-school programs, just as a college student graduating from ASU. From there, I was fortunate enough to be a part of the process in the designing and planning process designing and planning process for the community center when it was built and renovated in 1997 at Escalante Community as the first multi-gen center in the city of Tempe. Excuse me. As continuing on there, I spent 25 years there at Escalante as a coordinator, moving on as a manager, and participating in the City of Tempe education program where I received my master's in public administration through WIU, Western International University, and continued on with the city and opening up the West Side Community Center as well as the North Tempe Multi-Gen Center. And then last 18 months, I've been very fortunate to be in this role, working with expanding my level of experience with special events, aquatics, strategic priorities, moving things through as a division, being a part of the department, being global, Diablo Stadium, just a lot of things that I didn't have in my background at the community centers, but expanding my role as a leader and person in charge of the division for recreation. So, no. Thank you.
Hi, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Kathy Husser. I'm Deputy Director here, Community Services at the library. And I've been in that role for a little more than 2 years now. I started out in libraries, as a matter of fact. Many, many years ago, I started out as a page shelving books at the Glendale Public Library and worked through high school and worked my way through college and graduated from Arizona State University as well with a degree in marketing and consumer service. As a matter of fact, my husband of 28 years and my 2 grown sons also are graduates of ASU. So we are definitely a Sun Devil family. We're residents that we live and we work in Tempe, so we have a vested interest in this community. So when I graduated from ASU, I was fortunate enough to work in the business field. I worked for Kraft Foods and also Fleming Foods in the grocery wholesale business. I was a category sales manager who managed a team of 8 buyers. I was responsible for over $12 million of grocery inventory that was perishable, so we had to turn those items. And not only that, I really honed my skills in management, and it pretty much made the manager, gave me the foundation for the manager that I am today. Transitioning back into libraries, I earned my master's degree at the U of A and worked for the city of Chandler. I also worked for the city of Phoenix as a senior library administrator at Burton Bar Library. And that's where I gained additional experience in arts and culture from being the coordinator for our traveling museum and art exhibits, and also managing the adult programming and bringing senior programming to all 17 of the libraries at the city of Phoenix in their library system. I was responsible for over 400 volunteers as well. So it really set the stage for the great work that we've done here in Tempe at the Tempe Public Library and the great improvements that we've made. And you know, it's also allowed me to still work in libraries and you know, hold specific leadership positions at our Arizona Library Association advocating for community services projects. So I'm ready for the next step, and I'm ready to lead community services on our path. So thank you.
Good afternoon. I am Mike Svetz. I am the outsider up here. I have had a very blessed career in the field of parks and recreation. I am currently a principal with Pros Consulting, and Pros is a firm that basically does park and recreation, art and culture, some libraries associated with Scottsdale's master plan with Kathy, as well as a whole host of basically community service driven opportunities in agencies all over the country, and in fact also in Calgary, Canada. If anybody's ever been to Calgary in January, I do not recommend it. Long story short, I usually introduce myself on the consulting side as a recovering Parks and Recreation director because I did spend 12 years in 3 different locations being a director, most recently in the city of Goodyear, where I had the opportunity to manage spring training complex for the Indians and Reds, as well as oversee the public art program parks maintenance as well as the general recreation program. But where I think this is most relevant is I spent 5 years in the city of Charlottesville. Many people did not know that location, unfortunately, until last summer. But that is also a university town. The University of Virginia is there, and had the opportunity to take 5 years of experience and feel as if it was 10. Whether it was parks, whether it was community centers, golf courses, recreation facilities, swimming pools, being the liaison for a conglomerate of nonprofits that ran the art and culture program in Charlottesville. In fact, the city actually owned an art called the McGuffey Art Center, in which it was a old school building in which artists actually had their own studio, and the city managed that as well. So I look forward to this process and appreciate your all's time and attention on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. Thank you.
Okay. And for the first question will be Keith answering, then it'll go clockwise, I guess. Anyone have a question out here that would like to? Okay, there you go. Tanya?
Hello. I would like to know what your strongest leadership attribute is and which attribute could you better refine.
Thank you, Tanya. You know, I think for me, it's always been about being part of the team in reference to working with my staff and my area, my division. You know, as far as leading by example, I think just being one that's always backing what I say, as far as stepping in when need be and helping a hand, lending a hand, and just being a part of the process as far as communicating together and being a leader and listening. And you know, for years in reference to working at the community centers and the last 2 years working in recreation, learning a lot of different things and a lot of different aspects, but just understanding the expertise of your staff and understanding that they worked really hard to get to where they've been and be able to work through what they want to do and things they try to accomplish and support them any way possible that I can. So that's one of the things that I do. And then as far as things for me to work on, I guess, it took a little while, but I think as far as stepping out when I came a manager leadership role was jumping back and being hands-off, whereas I wanted to be involved and wanted to try to do things my way. But I've learned over the years that all the staff that are here are very well trained, very well with the community, very well with the kids and what they do. So just helping when I can, but just making sure, giving them the opportunity for them to learn and grow, and whatever things I can do to assist them in moving forward in their professional career is something I continue to strive on.
I would say my strongest attribute would be employee engagement, and we've seen a lot of that happen at the library. For example, it's not only learning about one-on-one, what are your goals, what are your achievements, what do you want to do. It's also providing those opportunities for professional development. It's also celebrating the big wins, celebrating the small wins. It's becoming a team. It's very similar to what Keith mentioned about being engaged and things of that nature, but it's also getting down to who you are. What do you want to do? You want to feel good about coming into work every single day, doing your best, and having that support and that help to achieve that. So we've done that in the library with Staff Day. And I thanked Stephen immensely for allowing us to close the library one day a year so that we can have, the chief of police come in and talk about change management, to have, active shooter training for safety. So it's all of those pieces together so that you feel that you're a part, like a larger team, and that you get that employee engagement. I've done that in all the roles that I've had leading up to this, and it's really nice to see the results of it in Tempe as well. As far as something to work on, unlike Keith, I only have a couple years in Tempe, so I'm still learning the people I need to go to get the answers in Tempe. But I've done a great deal of work in that. I'd say I probably know about 95% of you out there. We reach out to arts and culture and to Michelle Dock to come up with youth programs. I know who I need to talk to about senior programs in Escalante after Keith left with Alex. I know who to reach out to in HR, as a matter of fact. So I think also it's still kind of learning my way through the Tempe kind of questions and answers. But I'm learning it, and I love it here. So that was a good question.
Thank you for the question. I would probably define my leadership as a servant leader. I really don't think I recognized what that terminology meant until somebody pointed it out to me. It is really about teaching and mentoring and empowering folks to do your jobs. As a director, the one thing that I think you learn very quickly as you progress yourself up through, you don't become a director overnight. You have to start somewhere. And I think the one thing that you learn is you can't do it all, and you can't be in control of it all. And you really have to trust and communicate and set the direction for the department and allow people the opportunities to do your jobs. I would say that probably the strongest attribute is being able to connect with folks. Everybody receives information differently. Everybody loves to be communicated with differently. It's just how everybody's wired. But that doesn't mean that you don't treat people fairly. And I think that is a really important component to being a servant leader. One thing I think that is always a challenge as a director is balancing the management and leadership of your department with the role of being a director, being one step removed from the city manager's office. That is always a challenge because you certainly end up on special project teams as a director, and some of that ends up with nothing to do specifically with your department. So it's always a matter of making sure that you have the right balance between paying enough time and attention and energy with your department, in addition to balancing, the values and the strategic direction that City Council and City Administration, put you forward with. Thank you.
I think for me, what I do best is provide a strong foundation for the department that I work with, in which other people can then do their best work. So I feel that my role is to manage resources, provide them and find a way to provide those, remove obstacles so that we can, with a shared vision, create really good work for our community. And I think a leadership style, that's where I excel. I'm also a collaborator, and both internally with other departments as well as externally with community partners. And I think that when you have a coalition of people, you can do much more things. You can do greater things together. Perhaps one of the areas that I can improve is to exert myself as a leader in certain situations where people may not see me in that role, but I have something to offer. And so to make it known that I'm a leader and I have something to contribute, and this is what I can do for our city.
Any questions from the audience? Yes, in the back, Ralph. And wait for the microphone, please. Oh, sorry. You're loud enough.
I guess I really don't need this, but. Hi, everybody. Thanks for taking your time to do this. I know it's a lot of time out of your busy schedules, so I appreciate each and every one of you kind of coming forward and stepping up to go for this job, so thank you. What actions, initiatives, or programs, if any, have you been involved with which were aimed at increasing diversity in the workplace? What was your role? What did you learn?
The initiatives or objectives that I've had as far as increasing diversity and inclusion, I did a lot of that work at the City of Phoenix. I hosted a national traveling exhibit from the United States Holocaust Museum. And that was an eye-opener, and that talked about something that happened in history. That talked about excluding people. That was a very, it was very, very moving, to be quite honest with you. It was a 13-week exhibit that dealt with 13 programs. We had something like 10 to 12 partners. We had author panels. We had Holocaust survivors in our human museum or human library, where you check out the individual and then you spoke to them about their experiences during that time. That was very eye-opening, Ralph. And the reason I say that was so poignant for me and that we were involved, it was very time-intensive. And to be quite honest with you, we had to have special security for that as well. We were in the middle of downtown Phoenix, and it was about 3 or 4 years ago, and times weren't, you know, I don't know, but we had to make sure that everyone was safe and that everyone's voices could be heard. So that was definitely a moving experience. To kind of expand upon that, I just want to let you know, we have programs in the library from civil dialogue. We have religious programs, we have ESL, we have citizenship classes. But all of that said, bottom line, we're all responsible for that initiative in our own selves. It's respect, it's having open dialogue, it's talking about issues, but it's also being respectful of other people's opinion. And you know, that's the kind of leader I am. I will support any kind of open dialogue and programming that brings in other people, but we're also a family here. We're also internal customers, if you will, and we also have to show the same respect and consideration for various opinions in our workplace and in our community. So I think it's something that I was raised with and I carry with me no matter what I do. So that's a really good question.
Thank you for the opportunity to respond to this. I think in this day and age, diversity and inclusion is extremely important, probably more so now than at any point in the last 25, 30 years of this country's history. Whether that is inclusion and diversity amongst the staff, or whether that is inclusion and diversity amongst the community in which we serve. The one thing that you learn about community services is that you're an outward-facing department. And what that means is that you're tasked with providing experiences for your community. And those experiences, when you speak to the members of your community, it is not about a specific demographic of your community or a specific socio-demographic of your community. Everybody here has a different background. Everybody here was raised by different sets of parents. And there are some things that we don't get to choose in life. We don't get to choose our skin color. We typically don't get to choose how we were raised religiously. We don't get to choose whether we were male or female. We don't get to choose whether or not we were raised with silver spoons in our mouth or we were raised in public housing. Everybody has a story to tell. And I think it is extremely important as a staff to allow those backgrounds to be able to come forward, because at some point there is a connection between your background and your experiences with each other, as well as members of the community in which you serve. That is very important to recognize the value of your background and your own diversity and your own desire to be included. And if you respect that and you recognize that, it makes it so much easier for us to connect as a staff, but also to connect with the community in which we serve.
Diversity is a conversation we've been having for a long time in this country. I remember 40 years ago, affirmative action being the thing in the workplace that was top of mind. And my mother at the time worked for the federal government, and as the only brown person in the staff, she was asked to be on a national task force in order to consider affirmative action and then implement it, even though she was a low-level employee. In the museum and arts and culture field, we've been dealing with ways of incorporating diversity into our workplaces for probably 30 years. And now what we're looking at is beyond diversity into inclusion and equity. And that's a place we've never been before. For me, you said action, and what actions have you taken? And I think that is key, because you can talk a lot about something, but what are you going to do about it? And in my career, from my very earliest time, like in the city of Ketchikan, my first major exhibit was called Carving a Cultural Heritage. And now I am not a carver, nor am I a Native American person. And so the first thing I did is hire a guest curator who was the premier carver for that style of artwork. He was our guest curator. He had the budget. He made the decisions, and I executed the plan. Working on that job was also Native American folks in key positions, so that we transfer the power to those folks and executed their vision. And I think that's a tangible way that you show that you're committed to diversity in the workplace. That's continued throughout my career. I'm still doing it today. And now with this arts and culture tax in place, I'm hoping we can do more of that in arts and culture in particular.
Thank you, Ralph. It's definitely a great question. Early on in my career here at the City of Tempe, as African-American male, I was in the middle of a predominantly Hispanic community in Tempe, and one of the things that I learned quickly is, I was an outsider in the community, and as a role model and a leader with the community and the kids and the families that I work with, it was really evident early on as far as the communication, the differences, and embracing the differences that we have and where we come from. As far as actions go, it led me to be a participant and part of a governor's state grant and creating a program called C², Crossing Colors, that we implemented in the Tempe Elementary School District, talking about diversity, opening up that dialogue about being different, about embracing one another, about building bridges, about getting along in your community, not in just your own neighborhood, but the neighborhood across the way, across the freeway, and just embracing your neighbor and something that's different than you. As far as being in here at the city for 25 years, I was initially involved with seeing how the diversity department came about in the city. And unfortunately, there were some troubling times that the city had back then where we had to come up with a diversity office and diversity program, and just kind of making sure as a leader and working with staff and employees, making sure you carry that message that as a city, we want to make sure everybody is treated fairly, everybody is treated equally, and embrace the differences in cultures in the workplace, not only in the community, but also with one another on a daily basis. So.
Go ahead and read one of the questions because we had quite a few questions submitted. If you need me to repeat it, please let me know. As Community Services Director, you'll need to manage and advocate for divisions within the department. How will you ensure the equitable distribution of time, attention, and resources to all divisions within the department?
Sure. So I think the recognition, the very first recognition is the simple fact that we are community services and we are providing programs and services for the community. One of the things, actually a couple of things that are really going to help drive the bus on this. One is there is an art and culture tax in place, and that is perpetual funding. But that does not necessarily mean that art and culture has to reside in locations that are defined to be art and culture locations. That means programs and services can be pushed from an outreach perspective. One thing I think we have to realize is that we all have roles and responsibilities to provide those programs and services, and in many cases we're subject matter experts associated with that. The one thing that we all have at our disposal is public facilities and public space. And the ability to cross-pollinate programs and services in different public spaces is really, really important to making sure that we do not necessarily define where art and culture takes place, where library programs and services take place, where recreation programs and services take place. To kind of make sure that I think is really, really important from a program and service delivery standpoint. We have to go to where people are. And we don't have 16 libraries. We don't have 16 recreation centers. We don't have 16 history museums. But they're located in different parts of the community. and some parts of this community only have access to certain geographical locations. So making sure that we have the ability as a collective department to break down barriers to access related to the programs and services that we offer certainly will go a long way to making sure that we work together as a team. One other thing I think I wanted to touch on is to recognize that the outreach component, which I think very much exists in this department and in this city, is paramount to making sure that we all work collectively. The other thing I would like to mention is that part of the challenge that you always have with a general fund department, with the exception of art and culture, though is kind of a general fund department but has its own funding source, is to make sure that we recognize the opportunities associated with those funding sources that are meeting the community's highest and greatest needs. Two things you have in place. One thing is an art and culture strategic plan, and that absolutely, having read it, is one of the big reasons why you have that art and culture tax in place. And the second thing that you have coming up is a park and recreation master plan that will very much define the community's needs. So understanding those needs and understanding how we prioritize programs and services is going to be paramount to making sure that all three divisions, all four divisions, have the opportunity to feel as if they're a part of something bigger.
I think the first thing that you need to know to serve the divisions equally is to know them intimately. So the first task of the director is going to be in learning and assessing each and every department and the functions within it to make sure that they have the resources they need, that their staff is balanced, and that they have and that they are doing the work that they need to do for the community. Part of the way that that will happen is not only just meeting with the divisions and their staffs, walking through the facilities, gaining an understanding, is that we need a strategic plan that encompasses our whole department. We have plans for many different things. They're all piecemealed, and there's a lot of guesswork going on in certain areas of our department. So if we had one vision that had a segment for each division, then we can plan for the future rather than just going step by step, one step in front of the other. So I think you need a vision, you need to assess, and you need to come together, all of us, to determine what the best approach would be and then balance those resources across the department.
Thank you, Brenda. I think Mike and Brenda had some great answers in reference to, time itself. For me, a little bit different. I come from mostly a recreation education background as far as working within my years in community services, where I think I will need to learn a little bit more about the arts and culture programs as far as the activities and things that not only at the TCA but also at VIAL and just with the community and looking at the Ultra Culture Plan and where that's going as well as the library initiatives and things of that nature. I think for me, equally time-wise, I'd be starting with the things that I want to get myself more familiar with to make sure that I'm supporting them in any way I can, understanding their initiatives and their needs, and then also still not forgetting about my recreation folks and everything that we've been doing over the last 2 years and doing that in a way where I get caught up, as far as knowing all aspects of the department and then making sure all my time is equally pushing things forward as a goal and a vision that we come together, strategic planning and things of that nature, and looking globally about using space everywhere we can and maximizing the use of our facilities for our programs, our events, and anything that we can moving forward, and basically taking care of our division and all our facilities.
Well, since Shelley was so gracious to let us know about her retirement well in advance, I had an opportunity to go out and visit many of you at your sites. I learned a great deal about CIP from Sean at Kiwanis. Because again, I'm a library person, but I didn't know what aquatics was and what that dealt with. I met with Alex as far as fundraising at the TCA. I had met with Rebecca and also Michelle concerning public art and art engagement and how do we create donor loyalty at the TCA. Not only that, I was able to go to all the recreation centers and meet with Alex concerning our programming and the partnerships we have. So similar to what Keith mentioned, I know quite a bit about libraries, but I did my homework so that I was prepared to kind of learn the background on what was important already. Not only that, I've attended 95% of the council meetings since I got here. And that gives us a lot of direction. We can do whatever our residents want, but if we don't get council approval and we don't get funding, nothing's moving forward. The other thing is we also had a citywide space study that is coming to conclusion, and that's also going to drive a little bit of this direction too. Tempe's a fantastic city, but we are aging. Our infrastructure is getting older. We're going to need some refurbishing or some tear downs. And it's all about the people which are sitting in this room, the programming which we've already addressed, but also making sure that our infrastructure and our facilities are state of the art so that we're able to give those programs, we're able to make sure that those initiatives can move forward. So you want to gain that feedback, obviously, but you have to get the council approval, and you also have to know the direction of what the community wants and what our boards want as well. So, thanks.
Hi, thank you so much for coming, because I know this is probably not first on your list of things to do today. There's an atmosphere of competing resources. Resources are always limited. Community services really deals a lot with quality of life issues. So with the limited resources, how do you measure quality of life, both either positive impact or need, and make a case for that against other programs that need things as well that are much more easily measurable, water quality or crime statistics or all those kinds of things?
Well, in arts and culture, we are dealing with that question already in how do you measure the quality of life that we provide. There is a lot of data out there, actually. Some people think it is an intangible thing, but you can see benchmarks that mark progress in youth development, in test scores, in health and wellness. There are many tangible, measurable things that you can draw from to make a case for the reason that arts and culture, libraries, recreation, and the education programs should be funded. I mean, I think education programs are probably the easiest to measure because they have schools as benchmarks too, but those after-school programs and before-school programs are absolutely essential for many of our community members in order for them to be able to go to work and to earn a living. I think that the services that we provide in community services should not be considered as extra and the first thing to be cut in a downturn, but as essential elements of a healthy community. And so there are methods of measurement that you can provide, but there's also, I think, those things that the community can tell our elected officials, for example, about the benefits that they're gaining from the services that we provide that will be our ally in keeping our resources intact and maybe raising them. And Tempe is very good about that because they just passed, our residents, we just passed that arts and culture tax, which means that they do value the services that we provide. And so I don't think we have to worry too much in this city in particular, but we always have to be vigilant. We always have to provide that data and measure that data to be successful.
Thank you. It's a great question. In reference to finding public value in what we do as a department and how we succeed and what we do for our residents is a big part of the measurement of quality of life. Programs and services that we provide on a daily basis. As far as being competitive for resources, I think you got to look globally at the whole city. As far as we're one of many departments in the city, so it is tough to find resources or dollars to expand on what we provide to the community. But there is that juggling, working with the other department heads and department areas as far as seeing the benefits of what our needs are compared to what their needs are, and working together collaboratively on those things. The strategic priorities and the measurements that we're putting in place, quality of life measures is one of those things as far as getting those rates and the benefits and showing those tangibles as far as what we do on a day-to-day basis, impacting lives, changing lives, and not only with our youth, our adults, our seniors, and every age bracket that we work with. But moving forward, it's just, how do we show that rate of success? We continue to do it together as a department. A lot of things do overlap as far as in all the areas, as far as recreation, education, and arts. We do a lot of similar things, but different. And I think there's a lot of things that we can collaborate on to make sure that we're strong and carrying that message forward as a department and working with the rest of the city leaders to make sure that we have the funding that we need for initiatives or programs or trends that are shown, or gaps of services that are shown in some of our master plans and some of the outreach that we have with the community and some of the demands that they want and expect from us.
So as all of you are aware, some of you might not be aware, the city's gone to a data-driven budget. And what that means is we have to prove to our council members, to the directors, to the approvers of the budget, why we need certain funding, why we need to expand programming, and so on and so forth. Why do we need extra staff? So I had experience at the City of Phoenix with strategic planning from the library perspective. When I came here, I put a strategic plan together specific to the library. In that time, the city was also going to a citywide strategic plan, which I believe Community Services had, I think, 4, maybe 5 performance measures and benchmarks instituted. They were very broad-based: quality of the buildings, quality of programming, safety, things of that issue. Well, just recently in November 2nd, working with a committee, we were able to get library-specific performance measures for literacy engagement, Kids Zone specific measures for criminal, what was it? It was like criminal activity, whether you're a victim or whether you're in after-school care and you don't become a victim, things of that nature. It was also, there's a placeholder for arts and culture when the consultant finishes up with their recommendation. So it's about speaking the language of the city, and that's a data-driven budget. So if they need specific quality of life measures, then you give those. Okay, we're not feeling safe on the campus, and here's my narrative, here's why. And then we go to the supplemental process, the budget process, which is due in December. We state our case, give them the data that they need, and then we ask for extra guard coverage. We ask for security cameras. We ask for extra lighting. So I think, from a business perspective, I always want to make sure that I'm working within the parameters that I'm given. And, currently it's a data-driven budget. And so we have methods to get there. And I think you just need an advocate and a leader to know how to get us to that next step to do it.
I agree wholeheartedly with Kathy. Data is your friend. And what I mean by that is nothing squashes an opinion or affirms an opinion like a number. And if we don't use the numbers at our disposal to be able to tell our story, then we are basically falling short. One of the departments in the city that is always at the top of the list when it comes to funding is not, and it's not just because of public safety, it's because they use numbers, and that's the police department. They use numbers over numbers over numbers to be able to tell their story. And as a department, we absolutely need to do that. Can I see a show of hands of everybody in this room who feels like they work hard? So one of the things that we have to define is, as a department, it's not about level of effort. It's about the outcomes that we're trying to achieve with that effort. One thing that we always get caught up in is trying to measure volumes of work and putting those out there as performance measures. That's not a performance measure. A performance measure for programs and services is the number of kids, adults, whoever you were looking to target that participated in a program against the availability of the space that you had for that program. So would it not be more, I guess, persuasive to say that you had a program that you offered that had 10 spaces in it, and you ended up with 10 kids in it and 10 kids on a waiting list? Would that not be a more persuasive argument than saying that we did 50 programs that had 10 potential kids in it, but we only filled 50 of those spots or 100 of those spots. It's about what is your actual enrollment to your maximum enrollment. That's a big, huge performance measure for a service-driven organization. Being able to measure the costs that go into providing those programs and services is another significant measure that we need to consider. Being able to measure how we maximize the utilization of public spaces that we have at our availability. All of this has to tie back to why are we doing what we're doing? And one of the things that is paramount is to make sure that the reason to why we are doing what we're doing is not because we've always done it that way. The world is changing. How people want to recreate, how people want to receive information about the programs and services that are provided is very different than it was 10 years ago. And we need to take that into consideration when we start to prioritize our needs. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for being here today. Within the City of Tempe, we have 4 employee groups. Within Community Services, there are 2 that represent employees. We'd like to know, what is your experience in working with or knowledge of employee groups and unions?
So for those that are aware of my history and my background here with the City of Tempe, I was the Vice President and President of the Tempe Supervisor Association. Was heavily involved in some tough times when the city was going through some downturns as far as economy-wise, and basically being part of the union groups and having discussions about, going through our rules and regs and understanding them, going through our policies and procedures and understanding them, working through disputes between supervisors and employees, and basically being part of the process and making change in the culture of this organization. The union groups are a very vital part of what we do on a day-to-day basis. We work together as far as being in strategic opportunities or strategic planning. Some of it comes across as basically, making the employees #1 priority as far as day-to-day, as being part of the unions, basically the experience of just trying to make change and working together to make it better for the employees.
So my experience is in the, of the 4 cities that I've worked for, 3 of them I had experience with bargaining units in Chandler and in the city of Phoenix and currently Tempe. And let me tell you, we are so very lucky to work for Tempe. We have the best benefits. We are so well compensated. And we have a very, very generous holiday plan and our Flex Metaflex and things of that nature. And that came about because Keith and people in the union put those initiatives forward. If people aren't happy and people aren't engaged in their job, they're not going to do their best. So I know that Shelley, as Community Services Director, meets with the bargaining units once a month. And I was very fortunate to be able to fill in for her on many occasions. I've met a few of you in meetings, and I want you to know that the things that we do at the library, similar to what Keith said, is you want to do the right things for the right reasons and make sure that everyone understands that. And I think they're a vital part of Tempe. I think they're very, very important, and we're very, very fortunate to have them here. And I think having those lines of communication that we have in community services has been extremely beneficial. It's helped make us stronger and also really open up those lines of communication to understand where we're all coming from.
Thank you. I grew up in Ohio. My dad was an iron worker. And if that doesn't scream union, nothing does. And my mom was a school teacher, and she also belonged to a union. I grew up in a union household. My dad actually rose to the level of the Iron Workers Chapter 701 presidency, to the point where he actually had to go to national conferences, to the point where sometimes he kind of chuckled and said, "I'm a union president, you can rest assured that I'm on the FBI's list." All that said, I grew up knowing collective bargaining. I grew up knowing and understanding the rights of employees. But I also had the opportunity through my experiences, both as a consultant, as a director, to recognize the value of employees. And I'll give you a quick example. So my director job in the city of Strongsville, where it's a suburb outside of Cleveland, managed a 160,000 square foot multi-gen center as part of the responsibilities. The parks employees belong to a union, but the city insisted that all of our maintenance staff not be a part of a union. And they were at-will employees, in essence doing the same amount of work. So one of the things that we absolutely did was advocate for the same roles, responsibilities, policies, procedures governing the maintenance workers inside the recreation center with the collective bargaining unit that the park employees worked with. One other quick story is simply recognizing that there are two sides to the equation. One is the financial sustainability of a city, and the second is the rights of employees. And that's a balancing act. And I think anybody who has been at a collective bargaining table recognizes that. Because you're dealing with competing interests at times. I can say that when I did the zero-based budget review for the $78 million Parks business unit for the city of Calgary, one of the things that came out was just the unfair benefits that part-time employees were receiving for their Parks division and as compared to the full-time employees. Part of the recommendations, actually a number of recommendations around that, was to level the playing field for that collective bargaining unit in which all of them were a part of the same one, but one set of employees had part-time status and another had full-time status. So understanding how that all works through legal is very critical as well. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I've been a member of a union since I started working in a union shop when I was 12, and that might seem weird, and we can talk about that later, but museum staff, you know my stories. So I've been involved as a union member for almost my entire life, and I've worked in cities in which unions play a big part in how resources are allocated to employees. Probably the city that is most relevant in experience with unions is in Wenatchee, in which the department directors took an active role in negotiating contracts, and we didn't have a TSA there. The supervisors were basically aligned with whatever the union folks were getting. So we took an active role in reviewing the contracts and negotiating with employees and in the police, fire, and public works and office workers union. So I have direct experience in that negotiation. And what you find is that nobody comes out completely happy with union negotiations, but hopefully each side gains something that satisfies them for that round. And then what happens often, at least it happened in Wenatchee, was that the regular union employees were seriously out of whack with the police and fire employees. They had such a variance in the kinds of benefits that they were getting that they felt they felt excluded by that and mistreated. And so one of the things that we tried to do is maybe align them a little better so that those people that are working side by side, some in a union contract, some in a police and fire contract, or us and supervisors that were not represented, all felt good about the treatment they were being given by the city. And that's hard to do because there's all kinds of issues that go into that. But essentially, I do have experience in union negotiations, being a union member, and now being a TSA member, a proud TSA member, by the way.
What is the most important value you would want in the organizational culture?
Number one, the most important value would be valuing our people, valuing the people in this room. I mean, it's without the staff and the hard work that we do every single day, we're not able to enact the programs. We're not able to work on strategic plan. We're not able to work on, building a new aquatics facility. If we don't feel good, again, about coming into work every single day in an environment where we can do our very, very best, we're not going to be able to do the things we need to do. So it's all about, it's community services. It's not separate divisions. We're all in this together. We work together. And I think it goes back to, making sure that everyone's engaged. And, that's different for everybody. Some people want to move up. Some people are very happy where they are. It just really does depend on what it is. And I've done a very, I think a very good job of connecting with everybody at the library, meeting with them every 6 months, one-on-one, learning what their roles are, but beyond that, also learning, what are your expectations? What do you want me to do? What do you feel that needs to happen? What improvements can we make? And now it's gotten to the point after 2 years, what else can I do to help you? I was thinking about it the other day. We've promoted 7 people internally in the library, helping them get to full-time employment, helping them get to part-time, getting off of the temporary wage roles. So again, it really is dependent. If I'm not taking care of you guys, then we can't do anything else down the road. So number one, it would be employee engagement and making sure that people are getting what they need.
I think from a value system perspective, it begins and ends with trust. If we can't trust each other, it becomes really difficult to communicate. It becomes really difficult to respect each other. It becomes really difficult to want to do work with an individual. Folks, you all are sitting here today for a reason. You're sitting here because you want to have input into who your next director is going to be. And you're asking a series of questions that ultimately comes down to who can you trust the most to lead this department after Shelley has done such a great job the last 5.5 years. I mean, that's really what this comes down to. We all are going to come at it with, different levels of experience, but at the end of the day, it comes down to trust. If we can't trust each other, and we can't trust the people that we work with, the people that work for us, the people that we work for, relationship building, communication, respect, they're non-starters. So we have to be willing to be open enough to trust each other that we are in this for the right reasons and that we'll all be able to kind of move the ship forward together.
Well, I do think respect is important, and what you're respecting is not unearned. It's what that person has to offer to your work group. What skills do they bring? What perspective do they have? And how is that of value to you personally and to you in the workplace? So I do feel like a respect is incredibly important, because perhaps that'll translate in ways that you treat each other, and that if I know that you have something to offer me that's of value, then I'm going to include you in conversations you may not have been included in before. I may value the work that you do, even if it's not something I understand. And I'm going to provide you with those opportunities where they exist to learn more, to advance, because I do respect what it is you bring to the workplace. So each person is different. Each person has a different set of skills, personality, work style, and you have to adapt to what that is in a respectful way in order to move forward together as a work group.
Thank you. They're all great answers up here. Trust and respect and honesty and everything moving forward. And to be honest, it's about what we do on a day-to-day basis to serve the community. And basically what we're hired to do to provide to the residents of Tempe, I think is making sure we have all those values that bring the best customer service moving forward to provide on a day-to-day basis to me, that's a big part of what makes this organization and this department very successful, and should be our main goal together. You know, I think just making differences and impacts with everything we do in all the different areas, and there's a lot of different areas, not only in our only department, but the whole city itself, which makes Tempe a great place to live and be a part of, and obviously very fortunate to be employed here with all the great things that we do. So from that standpoint, for me, you know, you guys, great answers, but I think just making sure that we deliver the best service we can to the community, and making sure that we provide to the residents of Tempe and all those other residents in other cities that want to come here because of things that we provide in Tempe.
Oh, is it better to make a decision that you consider is correct, or is it better to make a decision that is less disruptive and popular?
That question very much defines leadership. Leadership is all about making the right decision for the right reasons, for the right outcomes. It is not always about taking the path of least resistance. I mean, there's a bunch of cliches that can go into answering this question, but they're cliches for a reason, because the cliches are typically tried and true. At the end of the day, being a director is not easy. Having done it for 12 years, you are always presented with choices and decisions that you have to make. At the end of the day, those decisions cannot be made in absence of logical thought, without recognizing all of the potential variables associated with it. And most importantly, I think you want to be able to make a decision that, you know, that you feel comfortable with. One of the things I think you recognize, though, in terms of being a director, is recognizing the fact that, is that good music or bad music? It is, I think everybody's taste in music is different, so some was good, some's not good, right? So long story short, did kind of lose my train of thought, but I think one of the things that you have to recognize as a director is simply the fact that in many cases, your job is about making recommendations. You have actually very few specific decisions that you have total autonomy over. And whether that is an HR decision, whether that is a legal decision, whether that is a financial decision, whether that is a policy decision, there are other people in the city in which you are making strategic recommendations to. The buck does not always necessarily stop with the director. The buck does stop with making recommendations around specific decisions, but to answer that question unequivocally, you always make the right decision no matter how hard it is, and no matter if it is going to, if everybody is on board with it. That is one of the biggest challenges, is to make sure that we are safe in a place where we can agree to disagree. And that at the very least we have consensus around that philosophical approach to making decisions that ultimately result in recommendations.
Well, I think I'm not cheating if I say we all know the answer to that question. You don't want to make the easy decision just because it's convenient and it causes less disruption. You don't make decisions in isolation, though. Sometimes you are the one giving the news that is not the most popular news for people to hear. But what goes into making that decision is a lot of input, and that is from oftentimes employees, sometimes it's from city administration, sometimes it's from council. And then you have to be the one to deliver that news and make it palatable for your work group. And I think that's the skill of the director, and where it's really crucial is how do you deliver that news? If it is not the most popular decision, how you go about delivering that news and how included people do feel in the outcome is important. But sometimes you just do have to make that tough decision. And the buck sometimes does stop with you, even though you may have support from the rest of city administration in that decision. And you have to be willing to make that tough call, follow it through, stay steadfast. But you hope that you're able to tell people what went in to make that decision. In some cases you can't tell. It may be confidential, but having people come along with you in that process often makes it more palatable.
Thank you, Linda and Johnny. I think the best decision is always the correct decision, and I think you work with your staff, you work with your colleagues, in making sure you have the facts, the information, and collaboration and communication to make sure that whatever decision needs to be made is one that you can live with and make sure that it's your decision. So, as far as the things that we provide and things that we do for the community, and then providing the services and the goal of the organization to look out for the residents and making sure that we're taking care of them and serving them how we should, and making sure we're making decisions that are beneficial to them and not necessarily sometimes our own benefits as a work group or department or individual, but the end game as far as making the decision for the residents of Tempe and making the decision that's best for them.
So to answer your question, Linda, I think it depends on what the situation is, to be quite frank with you. So here's a perfect example. We had a change that is coming down the pike for the library that I will take responsibility for, probably wasn't communicated as clearly as it should have been. However, there were a lot of communication and a lot of, honestly, complaints coming down from citizens and also from council members about certain customer service formats in the library. A lot of it had to do with our phone lines. A lot of it had to do with our ebbs and flows of the patrons that were coming into the building. And so, again, I had to make a decision to make a change. I think in retrospect, we're still going to make that change with the help of these other departments and alleviate some of the concerns that many residents had and also a couple council members. But I think what you need to do, is it good or bad? That is such a subjective term, because in this case, it was really bad for a lot of people, and I didn't see that. And I learned a very valuable lesson. You need to over-communicate something, explain the why if you can, because like Brenda said, some things are confidential or they're private and you're not able to divulge that. But when people understand why you're doing something, and it is for the betterment of the library or for community services or for our entire community, they're going to understand that. Another example, and I'm going to use a library example because that's where I work and that's what we handle, is in the library field, a librarian in charge is basically kind of like the person that you go to when maybe there's an incident, or if someone calls out, that librarian in charge would go ahead and either try to fill in for somebody, or they would mark the call-out list or something of that nature. And we've had some staffing changes in that we don't have a regular librarian in charge on Sundays. And so in the library industry, that would go ahead and that would float around to certain positions. But I made the decision, and the supervisors have been on board, that we're going to go to a rotating schedule so that we have librarian in charge people that are supervisors basically every single day, that no day is left open. So is that a good decision? I think so. I think the folks on Sunday will think so as well. Maybe some of the supervisors who didn't work weekends before, not so much. But again, you want to make sure that that message is communicated, and the reason behind it is the why. And again, you communicate it again in a different format and in a different format until people understand that. So I think, to answer your question, good and bad is so subjective, and it just really does depend on what kind of decision, what level, and where's it coming from.
Actually, we'll go to Brenda. And to make sure that you each have time to do a closing statement and to give individuals an opportunity to fill out the feedback forms, we'll go to the closing statement. So each one of you will have a minute to say how wonderful I am. Take your time.
Wonderful.
Take your time.
Sure. Can I just use that?
Yeah.
Use that? Okay. In my 25-year career, I've worked for 4 cities and 2 universities with increasing levels of responsibility throughout my career, culminating as 8 years as department director in Washington State. And through that time, I have extensive experience working with community, and I don't think we talked a lot about that, but one of my strengths, I think, is working with community and community groups in delivering quality programs. And I also have, in addition to having an emphasis in arts and culture, I have additional work experience in overseeing the other, many of the other areas of community services, like libraries, special events, education, and recreation. But it's not my job to get in the weeds and be coordinating programs or running facilities. It's to manage resources, and it's to clear the path for all of you to be successful, empowering people to do their best work. And I think that with me, I build strong work teams that are effective at what they do. I collaborate with others in order to deliver services. And I've been at some organizations in which we've gone through very transformative change, and I've been the leader of that. So here at the City of Tempe, I'm excited to see what I might do in order to take my skills and bring them to bear here in our department in our next chapter. That was a library reference. Did you get that?
I liked it. Very good. I just think over the last 25 years of my career, I've always been about the community, City of Tempe. I was basically born and raised in the city is the way I call it, because this is the only place I've ever actually worked. But I've seen a lot of things come and go. I've seen a lot of positives. I see obviously a lot of growth. Everybody talks about the sky rises and everything down on Mill and all the things that are happening. And you know, I call it the biggest little city. We are a big little city in the things that we do and all the programs that we provide. And I think that, you know, my relationship building with, you know, employees and my collaborations with agencies out in the community, the nonprofits, the school districts, and things of that nature is a big part of what the success of this community service department is. And I think I'm a well-rounded manager who just wants to make a difference and continue on that path. And you know, just having my career be here and just work with you all to figure out other ways to just get better. And it's just that's what we do, is just try to figure out a way to get better every day. And what we do, I'm a coach and a mentor. And you know, I just want to thank you for the opportunity today, and basically make sure you eat a lot of food this week for Thanksgiving and enjoy yourself. So my time is up.
Well, I just want to thank you all for coming out. I mean, you had some really great questions, and I think it really gave us all an opportunity for you to get to know us a little bit better and kind of understanding where we're all coming from. So thank you all. I just want to also reiterate that I have experience not only at the City of Tempe, but also in 3 other city governments, you know, 3 of those being in leadership roles. I'm a proven leader here at the library. Not only that, I have experience in, you know, implementing our strategic plan, making sure that I'm advocating for the resources that we need in community services. And when I mean resources, I mean, again, it all goes back to all of us here in the room and the people. My commitment to you is that you have a work environment that you can come into every single day, do your very, very best, that you're supported, that you're heard, and that we can collaborate together to make good things happen. You know, we have the best story to tell in community services. We're the feel-good department. You know, we offer programming and educational opportunities, award-winning Kid Zone programs. I mean, you know, what other city in the Valley can attest to that? So, you know, I would be honored if I could lead the group to that path. And I just want to thank you all so much for your time and for allowing me your consideration. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to have this dialogue with you. I wish it was a little more interactive, but you know, I'm an outsider with the hopes of becoming an insider, and I recognize the challenges that you know that I face with that. But having been a director for 12 years in 3 different cities, one an urban university community in which I moved from Cleveland, Ohio to Charlottesville, Virginia, below the Mason-Dixon line, I learned a lot about what it takes to be a good director. I had the opportunity to serve folks in 3 different cities, 3 different types of government, 1, a mayor-council form of government, 2, city manager form of government, but in 2 very different states with 2 different sets of community values. I think my experience, I think my broad-based opportunities that I have been given go a long way to hopefully having the opportunity to earn your trust and become your next Director of Community Services. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for the excellent questions. I really want to thank the panel, or not the panelists, but the finalists. They had a really long day today. They went through an interview process, a lunch with their bosses, which is not really relaxing, and then the employee forum. And then yesterday they also had a director forum, and the week preceding that they had their original interviews. So I want to thank you for your time. And please take a few moments to complete the feedback forms. There's a box in the back that has feedback forms on it. Just go ahead and drop those off on your way out. And thank you again for your time.